If you've ever made an album of original music, music that didn't have a commercial intent but was just made for you, let me know if you've had this experience when you go to post it. You go to DistroKid to go to Spotify, you go to SoundCloud, you go to Bandcamp, and you have to choose a genre that doesn't necessarily quite fit your music. It can be very frustrating, especially because these sites can't even seem to agree on a complete list of genre. And you might have thought, oh, you finally found the name of your genre, like I liked nu jazz when I discovered that one, only to find that that won't be there, and then you have to shoehorn your music into something else. So there seem to be two things pulling at each other here. On the one hand, it does feel right that there should be some classification for music, at least under capitalism where music is bought and sold, so that you know how to program music and such like that. But it also seems like the process of creating music, where musicians draw from a lot of different sources and then make piecemeal adjustments to the specific traits of genres over time, well, it seems like the current state of genre is actually pretty antithetical to that process. One thing I know from music school is that in classical music, or like just generally 200 years ago, genre actually did mean something different. It referred to the instrumentation. So a genre is a string trio or a string quartet, piano trio, chamber orchestra. These are all different genres. It wouldn't really make sense to separate out the music by feel, because that's not how concerts were being programmed. You were programming a chamber orchestra or a string trio or whatever, and those ensembles are playing different music. They're playing music by different composers. They're playing music at different tempos and feels because that's part of the practice. And one other thing that I have heard, at least anecdotally, and we're going to investigate in this video, is that the modern classification of genre, which basically has its roots in selling records and record stores and how records are going to be promoted, is intrinsically tied to American racism via, separating out otherwise would-be similar music into different genres for no other reason other than race. So think about the similarities between country and blues music. They're using really similar instruments, they're coming from really similar economic backgrounds, and they're creating songs of kind of similar structure even. What's the difference? Well, one is made by whites and one is made by blacks. So what I've been told then goes that there's now a lineage that carries that racist tradition, where rock, pop, those are white genres, and then when you have very similar music to that, it's going to be called hip-hop, R&B, something that is specifically tied to that race. So I wanted to do some research. I wanted to get to the bottom of what genre is, what genre can be, because if we can free ourselves from the genre conditions that we find ourselves in today, then I think that's going to be a really great thing for music making going into the 21st century. Without further ado, here's what I learned. There's a typical experience you may have had there's a typical experience to posting your music online that you may have had if you've made music for yourself and not an explicitly commercial purpose. You go to upload your music to whatever licensing site to get your music on Spotify or SoundCloud or Bandcamp or whatever, and you have to select a genre from a drop-down list, a finite list. And what can be so frustrating is that these sites do not even agree on what a complete list is. So you might have found a genre that works well for you. Like for a while I was like, oh, nu jazz, really fits. Only to not see that, and then you still have to shoehorn your music into one of the existing genres. So intuitively, something's wrong here. And it seems like there's two things that are pulling at each other, two intuitions. On the one hand, it does feel intuitive that music should have some type of classification. If nothing else, so that you know what to go searching for, or you know how to program something, or you know how to connect to an audience. Especially under capitalism where music is bought and sold, it makes sense that there's some sort of classification of that music. But on the other hand, the way that music is made is not that it always adheres to certain particular traits that are prototypical of a specific set of practices. Musicians are always going to be inspired from multiple sources. They're always going to make piecemeal adjustments to those standards and practices over time. This is part of the cultural progression of music. So in that way, the genre classifications we have are totally antithetical to that. The only argument you could make is that, oh, well, the genre lists can change over time or get more specific or whatever. But is there a better way? Two bits of information that I already have on this topic, at least anecdotally. One comes from music school, where in classical music, genre actually does have a different whole world. I mean, it actually is just something different. And it refers to the instrumentation. So a piano trio, a string quartet, a chamber orchestra, these are different genres. Because when you think about it, there's a practicality issue when you get a certain number of groups. It's not going to be every orchestra that can easily split itself off into these different chamber groups. So you're going to have the one group at your performance. And also, standard within classical performance is you're playing different music by different composers and periods. And even within a single piece, the different movements, they're different like tempos and liveliness. So already built into the practice is different feels, right? So it wouldn't make sense to divvy up the genre differently than that. So we already have one example of where genre has been different at a different point in time. Now the other piece of information that I have anecdotally is that there is an explicit racist aspect to our modern genre system. Now, don't freak out on me. Just listen. So the modern genre classification we have does have its roots very clearly in the record industry. It is within the process of buying and consuming records that we find the genre list we're familiar with today: rock, pop, jazz, whatever. And when you think about certain genres, they're actually extremely similar to each other, except for the fact that they've been separated. So think about like country and blues. Really similar instrumentations, really similar economic backgrounds of the stories being told, really similar song structures. What's the difference? Well, the difference is one is made by white artists and one is made by black and non-white artists. And so this theory postulates that then the genres that we still have today retain this bifurcation. And as time progressed and you had classical, but then rock music, and then the broader category of popular music, these became or stayed white genres. And what blues morphed into would be jazz, R&B, and later hip-hop, which have stayed black. Even as hip-hop and pop have merged into being very, very similar, even as country music continues to be really similar to blues-oriented pop music, even as rock music definitely wasn't just a white genre. These racial lines have sort of seem embedded into the code of these different genres. So here are my questions. 1. What other genre systems have existed throughout history? 2. Can we get a clear answer on the historical progression to our current system that we are familiar with now? 3. What other possible systems are out there yet to be tried? Which relates to 4, what have other people written on this topic? And finally, what is accomplished, good or bad, from having genre at all? So my friends, I set out on a journey. I embarked to discover the truth about genre. And if there really is an answer for this, because it does seem like the genre drop-down list on Bandcamp is super limiting. And if there's a better way to look at music going forward into the 21st century, that's going to make music all the better. So I think it's important to be able to figure it out. All right, so without further ado, here's what I've learned. All right, I'm back, and I got some receipts. Now, it might not surprise you to learn that genre and gender have the same root. And as we all know, there's only 2 genders. So that means there's only 2 genres: white music and black music. Wait, I said the later part. All right, I'm back, and I have receipts. So what did we learn? Well, first of all, it might not surprise you to learn that genre and gender have the same root. And as we all know, there are only 2 genders, and as a result, there's only 2 musical genres, male and female, case closed. Wait, what was that? Gender is a social construct, and also more of a spectrum. Shit, I guess we have more to go over then. So that shared root is genus, meaning like family. And yeah, while we're being a bit spicy, let's just go ahead and jump right into the idea that racism is at the root of modern genres. I laugh because I laughed when I realized the answer. Fucking obviously. In this article called The Reciprocal Nature of Music and Culture, it says, characterized by the guitar and harmonica, the Delta blues was identified by its rhythmic structure and strong vocals. However, As the music of Chuck Berry and Little Richard gained popularity among white teens in the United States during the 1950s, most of the new rock acts were signed to independent labels, and larger companies such as RCA were losing their share of the market. To capitalize on the public's enthusiasm for rock and roll and to prevent the loss of further potential profits, big record companies signed white artists to cover the songs of black artists. Many white artists and producers would also take writing credit for the songs and would buy the rights to songs from black writers without giving them royalties or songwriting credit. Well, I guess maybe there are only two genres, white music and black music, but dang, we're getting into some spicy territory. Actually, it's not that spicy. It's literally black and white. Anyway, so in the article they conclude, to reground the study of music and society, survey analysis needs to engage more at the social and musical basis of genres. Genre categorizations are not what listeners primarily engage with, and there's much diversity within genre categories. For example, while the category of classical music has been used to indicate highbrow musical tastes, many listeners of classical music encounter it in less highbrow situations. Genre meanings change over time, and musical objects are often ambiguous in their genre classification. All of this suggests that genres are dynamic entities that necessitate inductive analysis. And you can see that paragraph is actually heavily cited. You can see all the citations and the original article in the doobly-doo below. But I mean, also, like, things are totally different now, probably. I mean, that was just, like, one example, like, a billion years ago. So, what else we got? Well, as it turns out, I am not the first person to ask the question, what would a scientific approach to genre classification be? Apparently, this is actually an interesting question to people, and maybe the answer is obvious, but it has use. If genre has any purpose at all, its purpose. It's to give music some sort of, organization to be utilized. So I thought a lot of things were interesting in this article, a 2011 meta-study called The Structure of Musical Preferences, a Five-Factor Model. So this is very interesting. There's several main points I want you to take away from this article. And the first one is that genre classification is a bit of a mess. So let's do a review of the literature. So they say Cattell and Anderson, 1953. Catter and Saunders, 1954. These investigators attempted to interpret 12 factors, which they explained in terms of unconscious personality traits. For example, musical excerpts with fast tempos defined one factor labeled surgency, and excerpts that characterized by melancholy and slow tempos defined by another factor labeled sensitivity. In 2003, we have Renfrow and Gosling. They examined individual differences and preferences for 14 broad musical genres in 3 U.S. samples. The studies converged to reveal 4 music preference factors that were labeled reflective and complex, intense and rebellious, upbeat and conventional, and energetic and rhythmic. Now, those seem like 8 things to me, but I digress. In a study of music preferences among Dutch adolescents, Delzing and colleagues assumed self-reported preferences for 11 musical genres. Their analysis also revealed 4 preference factors. Wow! Oh, we have another study in 2008, self-reported preferences for 11 factors, and revealed 4 factors for women and 5 for men. Oh, okay, sophisticated, heavy, rebellious. So, first thing that we can surmise from all of this, genre is definitely socially constructed. In fact, if there's one thing that I've learned from doing this research, it's that genre classification might itself almost be a form of communication that's slightly distinct from the language that might be used to discuss it or the music which it describes. It's very much like language, an ever-changing process, an act of continual renewal based on usage and based on, things falling in and out of favor. So that's interesting. But there is actually a little bit of convergence. I mean, at least they, are willing to go to that five factor upper limit. Now, I'm not the one who did the study. They think that the overlying factors or underlying factors would be a mellow factor, relaxing music, an urban factor, defined largely by rhythmic and percussive music. Sophisticated, that includes classical, world, jazz, and an intense factor defined by loud, forceful, energetic music, and a campestral factor comprising a variety of different styles. So this is like folk. So already here, all right, let's do some analysis. Okay, so in the first factor, a mellow factor. Is music generally comprised of that right now? I think so. There's obviously like a lot of music for relaxation and ambient music and stuff like that. And I can also even buy the fifth point equally well, even though it's very broad, this whole like folk music, campestral. I think that, you know, when it's like folksy singer-songwriter, telling your own story, there's a broad thing there. The inner ones are interesting. So an intense factor defined by loud, forceful, and energetic music doesn't necessarily just mean rock, right? There's room, potentially, for concerts that have loud, forceful music, but it's still mixing what we would call today conventional genres. The sophisticated classical world and jazz, I mean, those go together for me just because they'll be like what will get programmed on like public radio. But I don't think at the same concert you'd see that. And then an urban factor, defined by rhythm and percussive music found in rap, funk, and acid jazz. So maybe there is some crossover here, but again, what I see here is a distinct lack of the white-black binary. I mean, these categories definitely are going to fuse together aspects of certain genres that have been historically differentiated by race. So I think there's some interesting progress here. This is what the research is telling us about sort of what have other people said about genre? How can it all come together? What could the other system be? Now, it's actually very difficult to find great information, or at least it was, on like the specifics of what genre systems have existed throughout history, but when we look at historical genres, it generally seems like it'll be separated by function a little bit. So you might have like sacred music, high music, whatever. And I felt like perhaps even if I found more of those classifications, looking at the past in this case isn't necessarily a great indicator of, or the best indicator of what to do going forward. So I was curious, what have other people said about this? So let's go to the people. Let's go to Reddit. One Reddit post is titled, "The explosion of musical genres in the 20th century was a phenomenon brought about by the unique technological transformations of the time, and we take them completely for granted. One by one, they are dissolving almost as quickly as they burst into life almost a matter of decades ago." That is fire. I basically completely agree with that take. And it's one of the things that I talk about in another video where it's like, we assume 40 minutes of music because of the limits, the technical limits of a long play record, vinyl record. But, we don't have to be restricted by the medium. And at the same time, the recorded medium itself is very not necessarily integral to music if you look at the totality of how long we've expressed ourselves through music. So I think this is an amazing take and basically does cut to the heart of a lot of this, which is we're in a period of change right now. We're in a period of change. There's political, uncertainty. There's technological change with AI, and the world is completely, we're in Web 3.0, whatever. So I think that this is artistically an opportunity to use the change that's happening anyway to, get with the times as far as genre goes. All right, another Reddit post is titled simply, "Does anyone else find genre discussion endlessly boring and useless for discussing music?" Now, this one is a little less fire. This one is a little bit reductive, of course, because genre is for purposefulizing music, as we've already discussed. That is its purpose. So, maybe it's a little boring because you don't like talking about music, but I do agree that in certain subcultures of music, there can be such hyper-specific labeling that, it's like, it's useful for defining yourself, but at the same time, maybe there should be something else going on that's more unifying, right? So, in a brilliant piece titled "Why Genres Don't Matter" by Claudia Perry, she talks about how she wanted to investigate musical genre without social connotation. What sort of things are going to be sort of intrinsic to the psychology of how we perceive music that are more innate than social connotations? Try to filter that out in sort of a scholarly research sort of way. So they clustered into three basic categories: arousal, the energy level of music, valence, the spectrum from sad to happy, essentially, depth, the amount of sophistication. But I'm not 100% sure. I think they just came up with the answers themselves, like they rated them. I'm not 100% sure how they determined the scores. But regardless, because we saw the meta study earlier, or I should say regardless of the specific opinions of this author, a lot of what she's writing is just, again, amazing. Okay, check it out. Genres are a crutch for incompetent music writers. What do vague terms such as Americana, metal, which is one of those subcultures I was talking about, or country mean? Do any of those genres convey anything about how music sounds? Not really. Of a piece with genre fail is the incessant comparison of fledgling artists to existing performers. And, that's kind of what I was saying. If you're making music for yourself, and there's kind of the definition of a fledgling artist, and then it's like, yeah, but I'm not, the genres are based on. Anyway. Genres don't help artists either, she goes on to say. Say the artist has a sense of curiosity. They don't make the same album over and over. Well, now they're out. Genre labels are problematic for several reasons. First, they're broad umbrella terms that are used to describe music that vary greatly in their characteristics. If a person says they're a fan of rock, there's no way of knowing whether they're referring to the Beatles, Bob Dylan, or Jimi Hendrix. I mean, all of those are even from just a particular time span of rock. If they're a fan of pop, how do you know it's Michael Jackson or Justin Bieber? Socially driven, she says. Okay, here's the meat of it. Conceivably, there's no solution, and nobody needed one anyways. Music genre names might be plenty clunky, but they can nail down a basic idea just fine. If they fail, even at that, then conversation rolls on with an added talking point. If nothing, genres can be really fun diversion. It's another thing to talk in circles over, trying to refine how you and yours draw lines. It's a clash over categories, a wrangling of words, a match against meaning, or I don't know, some other similar brand of nonsense. So that's a very interesting piece. You should go read it. But a New Yorker article that I wouldn't pay to go beyond its paywall, we can just look at its title, Genres Disappearing, What Comes Next? There's some convergence of these themes. The New York is, the New Yorker, touching on the same thing as that first Reddit post. The technology's changing, so we're seeing the music and the genre change. I set out initially with one of my research goals being, what is accomplished for good or bad by having genre at all? And nothing I could say is going to sum it up as well as the very opening paragraph of the Claudia Perry piece. A record exec once told me the reason they had to categorize music by genre was so people would know where to find it in a record store. He followed it up by noting that genres were needed so records could be pitched to the appropriate radio formats. There you have it, people. Genre's point is to sell music. So when we're talking about the music itself, genre should be significantly less relevant. Or if it is relevant based on context, like, again, you're trying to describe music to your friend, or you're trying to describe your music to a lot of people so they know, what to expect from it, how you describe it. There should be a lot more fluidity there. So in conclusion, genre is a language like music or language itself, like I was saying earlier, and it's deeply embedded with social. So in conclusion, as I said before, music is a language, and spoken language is a language, and so too genre seems to be kind of its own language. It's a way that we talk about music. It's part of this reciprocal process between us and the music and how we talk about it that's described, the sociological phenomenon. And what's more, what we currently know genre to be is definitely racist and also very dependent on the technologies that existed and grew throughout the 20th century. So as a result of that, seem to be kind of disappearing. And indeed, if you already go and look on Spotify or what's the one, Hype Factor or whatever it is, they've already caught on to this. They've been doing feel-based playlists for a while now, although still kind of having the whole genre label there. But I like the idea that there could be some sort of overarching convergence. As we saw with the meta study, everybody's able to boil music down to somewhere between 3 to 5 overarching types of experiences. It's like you got your soft, you got your loud, you got your sophisticated, you know, and then maybe you have a couple, you know, you have like, oh, folksy what or whatever that might not fit neatly. But something's got to be better. Something's got to be better than rock, classical, jazz. Something's got to be better. In my opinion, something has to be better. Because all of those, you run into the problem of meaninglessness. Whether you have too many genres or too reductive of genres, you run into the problem of meaninglessness. So if we really want to get to the core of how to have like a handful of genres, it makes sense to me that you want to do it not on these social factors. You want to do it based on like just something very unifying about the process of absorbing that music in the first place. And then maybe a bit of randomness is helpful at that. And what's interesting here is I actually see a potential, not solution, but like actionable step. For better or for worse, there's quasi-monopolies right now. You know, there's SoundCloud, there's Spotify, and they're kind of couple competitors. If one of the main sites, SoundCloud, Hype Machine, if that's relevant anymore, I'm not sure. Back in my day, it was Hype Machine. Spotify. If one of these sites were to make a definitive sort of stance on the whole genre thing, and do it in the name of we're interested in post-racial world. Do it in the name of better marketing. Do it in the name of, we're going to be the radical first one who's actually going to take a step in trying to shape this conversation, this inevitable conversation. And the interesting thing is, that would have a ripple effect. Forever, things would be influenced by the fact that a major site introduced that particular thing. And it would just actually have a pretty big consequence. So I don't know, I don't know what the best company would be. There's really only a couple. That's the whole quasi-monopolistic thing. But whichever one would be the most responsive to some sort of public, what's the word? Get enough votes? Boom! Get the not I'm sorry to say it again. The not racist genres. All right. We're done with that. We're done. You get my point. Now, again, I am aware, in a lot of ways, Spotify already does this. They have curated playlists that are different feels, and again, that's responding to the normalization of this sort of feel-based approach. But I just think that something can be done to further distance ourselves from what we would consider the typical canon of genres: rock, blues, jazz, classical, pop. These are useless, outdated terms that the more that we can disassociate ourselves from, the better we're going to do. The better we're going to do. The better we're going to... I think, at least. But what do you think? And what have I missed here? If you liked the video, go ahead and leave a like on the video. If you hated the video, make sure to leave a comment so that I can respond to you, own you epically in the marketplace of ideas, and get some more engagement on this bad boy, so you'll actually be helping me out more in the long run. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate your time. See you in the next one. Leopard